You're listening to the Small and Supercharged podcast with Ria Freeman, episode 217. On today's Small and Supercharged podcast, we are picking up with Claire Williams, who is the Executive Director of the British Equestrian Trade Association. Claire joined us a couple of weeks ago to chat about the Summer of Safety, which is an amazing campaign. It's in its second year this year, which is helping to educate, inspire and inform people around safety. It's not to scare or to make people nervous. It's just to help educate. And today we're going to carry that on by talking about the importance of fitting when it comes to our safety kit and also the differences in different things. So hello, Claire. Thank you for joining us again today.
Hello, Ria. Nice to be here again.
So anything you'd like to add to the Summer of Safety, as I've just given it a quick intro, just to remind people about it, really?
Yeah, Summer of Safety is all about highlighting all areas of safety, whatever we're doing, whether we're riding or leading or lunging, being about our horses. And with the weather as it's been this summer, unusually, even in Yorkshire, we've had lots and lots of chances to get out and do things with our horses. So it's really highlighting whether that be hats, body protectors, tack, riding out on the road, using high vis, feeding, all aspects of being around a horse is trying to make it safer.
Brilliant. Now, on today's episode, we're going to chat about the importance of fitting and also the differences when it comes to safety equipment, because not all hats, body protectors, anything are created equal, but also the fitting is really important. We often focus on the standards, which is important too, but there's more to it than just what label is in your hat or your body protector. So if we could start with hats, if that would be okay, can you just talk us through the differences in a hat? Because you don't just go in and say, I want a riding hat and shove that on your head and crack on. What are the differences when it comes to sort of standards and styles?
Yeah, so obviously hats are, we always say, and I think sometimes that the hat tagging system that a lot of the disciplines use is great because it tells them that the hat is up to the standard. But what it doesn't do is that whether it's actually going to stay on the head in the right way. Because if a hat doesn't stay in the right place on the head, it's not going to do the job it's supposed to do. So that's why we do go on and on about fitting. So so the different styles. So obviously you've got your jockey skull, and you have your riding hat, which usually have the peak. A lot of people think when they see a riding hat, say show hat or something like that, or a show jumping hat, they see the peak. They think, oh gosh, it's a fixed peak. It's not actually. The way hats are made, even though they look as though they've got a peak fixed to the front of it, it has a degree of flexibility, and the hats are actually tested for that.
Oh, wow.
So they may look as if there was a fixed peak, but it's not. It will flex, but so cross country you can only wear a skull, so no form of peak or peak-like extension to the front. So you've got riding hat and your jockey skull, and the standards do make a difference in terms of both the level of protection offered by the hat, but also how they sit on your head. So some of the standards, for example, are designed to come lower down on your head. So something like a Snell standard, which is the one that comes out of America, started out as a ski helmet standard and then was extended to riding. That is designed to have a much stronger shell. So what I always say is, if you tell me what sort of accident you're going to have, I'll tell you the standard you should have been wearing. So really helpful. But that's because if you, for example, are going to have an accident where the horse, it's a rotational, say, and the horse either rolls over you or lands on you, then you want a hat that is going to be super, super strong so that it doesn't crush you. So that means you would want something like a Snell or a Paz because they have higher levels of crush resistance. But sometimes those sorts of qualities also then have an effect on the way the hat fits your head. Because if it's a much lower down hat, then that's, if you've got an unusual shape or a shallower crown, that's not going to fit your head appropriately. So that's why they are really different. And that's because each standard tends to come from the country and reflect the activities in that country. For example, The PAS 015 is the one that's the British, then is the British standard. And we've always been very keen on safety, probably because we have such fantastic manufacturers of safety hats. And so they tended to have demanded more of their hats. It's also, after all, where eventing started. So we were always doing probably slightly more risky things on our horses. So that's why the PAS standard has always traditionally been one of the highest. When you look at something like the other US standard, the F1163, and I'm sorry, there are lots of numbers, but we have a handy little guide on our website, and there's a poster you can also have to see some of these numbers. The F1163 comes from the US, and quite often when you see hats to that standard, they've got big ventilation holes in them. Now, that's because in a lot of parts of the US, it's a heck of a lot hotter than it ever is going to get here.
Yeah.
So they like hats with more ventilation in. And so their hats tend to be more lightweight. They have holes in the top, which means they don't have a penetration test in that standard, whereas the PAS does.
Because that's the thing, isn't it? It's not just a case of if you throw your hat on the ground, is it going to do the job? That the different standards relate to different tests that the hats have on them from that have been, I'm sure I've seen a video of one being like dropped on a spike.
That's the penetration. Champion has some fab videos as well. We use those. So yes, there's a penetration test. So that's the spike test. There is the we call them it's a hazard anvil, which is like a curbstone. So like you coming off and hitting a jump pole, for example. So the tests are meant to replicate the type of accidents we have.
And the different numbers, the different standards relate to how many of these tests the hats have been put through. Is that right?
Sort of, yeah. So if you think of if you lined up the tests like the PAS, the F1163 and the EN 1384, which is the old European standard, they'll all share some of those tests, but they won't all have them all.
Right.
And there's a really useful, again, Charles Owen did a really useful little graphic which details this. So it has all the tests, and then it has which standards meet which tests. And there's a table again on I'm pretty certain on the Beta website, which explains this. So the one that has the most tests is the Snell standard, and the one that has the least of these tests is probably the American standard, the F1163.
Sure. Now, if you're thinking of buying a hat, obviously it's really important to understand the standards, but it's also worth, particularly if you compete, to make sure that the standard you're looking to buy fits the rules, because there are differences there, aren't there?
Yeah, there are. So we work closely with the disciplines to make certain that their standard, their rules are not only up to date, but they're also written in a way that people can understand them.
Yeah.
So the most of the disciplines update their rules every year, and they will then determine which standards are appropriate for their rules. So, for example, eventing, riding club, and pony club tend to all share pretty much the same. An example for the hat rule, because they mutually tag each other's hats, so they've really got to meet the same requirements. But they also ask for quality marks on top of the standard. So sorry to confuse people even further. You've got the number of the standard, but you've also then got what we call quality marks, and probably the best known ones for hats is the kite mark, and for body protectors is the beta mark. And that tells you that not only does the hat meet the standard, but it's checked regularly, so that if a manufacturer, a lot of people don't realize, if I made a hat tomorrow and sent it off for testing and it passed the test, I would never need to test that model of helmet again unless I changed something. So it could go for years and nobody would ever test again. And we know that things go wrong, because that's how the beta standard is based, is that body protectors have to be retested every year. And we found instances, as have a BSI with a kite mark, where something's happened in the factory, maybe a change of staff, and they've done something differently. And in doing something differently, they've changed the safety of the garment they're making. And
Crikey.
so regular testing will pick that up. So that's why the disciplines tend to ask for not only a standard, but a quality mark on top. So if you're doing a more of a high risk type of activity like cross country, then they're likely to ask for one of they'll accept all of the standards usually, but they will ask for the quality mark on top, because that's like an extra security that you really are wearing the best equipment. Whereas if it's something that might be perceived as, say, a lower risk of activity, they might not be so insistent on the quality mark.
Oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know about that. Now, obviously, knowing your standard is really important, but getting the correct fit, because even if you've decided you are a 3 in a particular make of hat, that doesn't necessarily mean you are a 3 in another hat. And also, it's not only 3s, you get different numbers and different sizing, and the fit is so important. Years and years ago, when I was much braver, I had an incident where I fell off a horse over a very large jump. I don't know why that happened, because I'm a wimp, and my hat, I hit the floor and my hat flew off in front of me.
Oh,
Um,
God.
I was fine, just sort of mild concussion, not diagnosed, but I did have quite a sore head. But I remember thinking that can't be good at all, as my hat overtook me. And I remember thinking, oh my Christ, my head's fallen off. That, I mean, I probably did have quite severe concussion. But that hat technically fitted, but it really didn't. So can you talk to us about the importance of fitting and how you make sure your hat is the correct fit?
Yeah, I think firstly, I'd always say go to somebody who knows what they're doing. So I'll always say, and we say at Beta, please don't buy safety equipment online. Get them checked, or if you do, get them checked. But there is a difference in sizing. And actually, even if you've always thought you're a 3 in that model of that brand, 1 3 does not necessarily fit exactly the same as another 3 of exactly the same model and hat.
No, it really doesn't.
It doesn't, because hats are in effect still handmade, and they all tend to be hand finished. And in hand finishing them, there will always be a slight difference from one hat to another. So it's really important, because a hat, at the end of the day, it does have a degree of technology about it. You have a harness that has to be adjusted. We all have different shaped heads, and we have all lumps and bumps on our heads, and those lumps and bumps can affect the way a hat fits you. And so that's why it's so important to go somewhere where they have that expertise. Beta trains retailers to fit hats. A lot of the manufacturers will also offer training on their particular range to understand what they're doing with their hats. And in having it appropriately fitted, it means that they can tweak sort of really the micro fit of the hat. So if you need, say, a bit of tape added, say at the back of your head, because you've got a dip in the back of your skull that somebody else doesn't, then they can fill that little gap with a bit of hat tape. So they can really tweak it. They can make certain that the harness is adjusted properly, so that when you leave the shop, you know that. And to be honest, the first time you put your hat on, that's probably the best it's ever going to fit, because after that, it starts to get wear and tear. The harness starts to stretch, the laces start to stretch, and then the what we call the comfort liner, which is a bit of thin comfort foam on the inside, starts to compress. And that's equally why it's really important, say, every 6 months to go and see your retailer and get them to check the fit of it. Because the fit will vary both front and back. So what we're looking, when you put a hat on, there shouldn't really be any wiggle front to back or side to side. It should sit nice and low, not too low, but just over your eyebrows, and be even. And the harness around under the throat should really please. I always cringe when I see photos in magazines where you could literally get 4 fingers through the throat strap. It really needs to be 1 or 2. And the harness at the back, especially if you've got a laced harness, that needs to be checked on a regular basis.
I think actually it was the when I talked about my hat falling off, well, flying off, I'm pretty sure that was harness based, because the hat was fine. Well, obviously it wasn't ideal, but as I hit the ground, because the harness clearly wasn't tight enough, didn't have any resistance, just
No, exactly.
took off. I mean, also the fitting, obviously you need to make sure it ticks all the boxes that you said, but the great thing about going into a shop and having it fitted is you can check for that comfort as well, because I'm sure you've had this experience as well, when you've worn an ill-fitting riding hat and it just hurts to the point you can barely concentrate on what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And so most retailers will put it on your head and say, walk around the shop, so
Yeah.
you can shop for other things. But also let it settle down. And also, if it's a really hot day, we have blood vessels on quite near to the surface of the skull. And if it's really hot and they swell up, then that can even change a hat. Also things like your hairstyle.
Yes.
So if when I had longer hair, I'd braid my hair. That would actually, if I had a slightly loose hat, that would help it fit a bit better.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've got to remember that. So if you're going in to buy a new hat, think about how do you normally wear your hair,
Yeah.
and tell that they should ask, but tell the retailer, well, it's actually down, but I normally have it braided, or I've got it braided today and I don't normally. And that sort of thing can also make a difference.
And you said about going in to have it checked regularly. That's something that that retailers will check for free, isn't it?
Yeah. Normally they will
Normally.
absolutely,
Normally.
as long as they've sold you the hat. To be fair,
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
not fair for you to buy one off Amazon and then go in and ask them to check it. That's just not fair.
No, that's just rude.
Yeah, it is. But so if you've bought it from them, and they will normally say, please come and back and get it checked in 6 months or 12 months, because that's really key. You've got to keep on top of it, in terms of fitting. Otherwise, it just can't do its job properly.
Now, talking about another product that definitely needs fitting, body protectors. Again, I remember these when they first came out, and they were uncomfortable, cumbersome things. And I do remember being, again, in a fair amount of discomfort with one that was probably not the right size. But that has changed completely now. And I was amazed I've tried on a few different body protectors very recently, and the difference in them now is incredible. I barely knew I was wearing it, whereas before it was like I felt in a suit of armor.
Yeah.
So we know fitting's important. Obviously, I want to quiz you about that. But there's also different standards when it comes to body protectors, aren't there? These are slightly easier to understand, though, aren't they? For most of us normal riders, we only really need one.
Yeah, that's a beta level 3, so that's easy. Beta started that they wrote the first standard for body protectors in the 90s, early 90s, and then when it became a piece of PPE officially in Europe, it was converted to the European standard, which is the EN 13158. Still is with 3 levels of protection, but in reality, we only really ever use level 3. Level 1 was originally designed for jockeys, but actually now most professional jockeys, both Irish and British, they have to wear level 2 now. So really, but level 3 is for everyone else. So that is now the black and teal label. It used to be the purple label, but the purple was 2009, and the black and teal is the 2018 standard. And that's a long gap, I know. People will say, but it's because the body protector design and protection hasn't changed that much over time. But you're right, Ria, they have completely changed thanks to different foams coming through. And I know there are some really, really exciting developments happening on the foam front, because there's there's a company that's developing a new foam that will hopefully be even lighter.
Wow.
And we've been speaking with a scientist who works out of Bath University, who's also developed a foam for the aeronautics industry, for Boeing, and they think
Oh,
that
wow.
there is a room for that in body protector. So yeah, and also now we have what we call the blocked body protectors. So people like, well, they all do them now. Champion, Race Safe, Charles Owen, most of the brands will do one with little blocks. And that makes them more flexible. So yeah, let's face it, when it's 30 degrees outside, you are going to feel warmer if you put a body protector on. But we always see the key is, frankly, to wear as little underneath it as possible, because the foam that we use to make these garments is heat sensitive. So that on a cold day, if you put it near your skin, it will warm up and it will start to flex and become more comfortable. I mean, I love wearing mine in winter because it means I
Yes.
can put it next to my skin and then just put everything on top. And in summer, and I rode out this morning early, it was warm, but I had it on and I just had a really, really light vest underneath it. So the whole idea is to do its job, it needs to be as close to your skin as possible. And the reason it's important to have it fitted is both for that reason, but also so it doesn't interfere with any other bit of you, whether that be touching the back of the saddle or at the front,
Yeah.
so that you can bend and flex as you need to.
And the fit as well, the way they're designed, they obviously cover specific bits of your torso, but particularly if you are wearing one that's too small and the sides are, obviously there's lots of adjustment on a body protector. You can adjust at the sides. Well, actually, probably you can mainly adjust at the sides and the top, can't you? But it's important that they are fitted correctly, so you're not leaving exposed areas, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. The whole idea of a body protector and the standard is written so there's no gaps where there shouldn't be a gap. And the design has changed. So in the very early ones, we used to have more adjustment on the shoulder. So, but if you over adjusted on the shoulder, you could then expose some of the collarbone or some of the shoulder. And so you'll quite often see contrast markers, red or yellow markers. And when you can see that marker, that's telling you it doesn't fit you anymore and you're likely to be exposing some of the bits of you that shouldn't be. Similarly, on the side, you don't want it gapping on the side because that's where your ribs are, and that's the bit that we're really trying to cover. And then at the front, the foam should come just below your bottom rib. And again, that's because it's trying to protect your ribs and the bits of you inside that the ribs equally protect.
And I know we said that really, you shouldn't be buying hats online, you should be going to get them fitted. Does the same apply for body protectors, or is there a bit more scope to buy those online?
I'd be really boring and say no, because there is still a degree of adjustment that has to be done. And again, they do vary quite a bit brand to brand. And the advantage of going into a shop is that most shops will have a range of brands so
Yeah.
that you can see which brand really suits you the best. And in some respect, people are less aware of the sizing of body protectors than they are of hats. Because as you said, I'm a 58, say. And so that's my start point. But with body protectors, sometimes I'm a child's extra large, sometimes I'm an adult's extra small. So there isn't a systematic way of that sizing. That's why it's probably just easier to go in and try them on.
The good thing is as well with many body protectors is you can get them made bespoke, can't you? If you are particularly long in the body or short in the body. I know quite a lot of manufacturers do have long and short sizes, but if you are, I don't know, particularly big busted, or you have got other size areas that don't fit the normal size chart, you have got the ability. Some people do offer a bespoke option as well, which is another great reason to go into the shop, because you want to make sure that you're getting the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes even if they can't make it absolutely to measure, they can combine fronts and backs. So as you said, a shorter front or a longer back. I'm a weird shape, so I've got quite a high waist. So I had one made to measure, and if you have a true made to measure, you get your name inside it because that's what the standard says they have to do. So mine's actually labelled with my name,
Well, that's quite cool.
because it was made for me. So I find that quite cool.
Definitely.
But yeah, so some of them do, not as much as they used to, but you can still get them made to measure.
I would say from personal experience as well, when I went in and I tried it on probably 3 or 4 different body protectors, it was really good to see which ones, as you say, on the label, they were all the same size, very different price points, but trying them on and in the shop as well, you could sit in a saddle and kind of ponder life and think, well, yeah, it's all right, but would it be better if? You can't really do that online. You can't go and try on 4 different body protectors. And I think that's a really useful thing, particularly that they aren't cheap. Some of them are quite a significant investment, and you want to make sure they're going to fit you and you're comfortable and you want to wear it, because otherwise there really is no point, is there?
No, and I think the sooner you get into the habit of wearing, the easier it becomes. And that's why a lot of children have grown up now wearing body protectors. So for them, it's the second nature as putting their hat on.
Yeah.
Whereas if you've come to it later in life, they do seem to be, oh, really, must I? The other thing I'd put a vote in for are shoulder protectors, because one of the big benefits of shoulder protectors is protecting that really vulnerable point of shoulder, which connects to your collarbone. And that is where we see a lot of people will land on their shoulder, and that's what breaks their collarbone. But with that protection of a shoulder protector, we know from work that one of our former doctors did, Dr. Whitlock, that reduced the likelihood of a collarbone breakage by, oh gosh, was it 75 or 80%?
It was
It was a
really
really high
significant.
percentage. Yeah.
Yes. And do you obviously you buy shoulder protectors separately, but are they available for all models?
Not all models will have a shoulder protector, but quite often a shoulder protector will work on other models.
Sure.
So, but sort of the British brands all have shoulder protectors available. But I think a lot of people just look at them and think, well, the cost in proportion to the cost of a shoulder protector, when it seems to be so small, related to the cost of the body protector, it seems out of proportion, but that's purely because of the foam and the manufacturing that goes into the shoulder protector is extra. But it is, if you have a granny who wants to buy you something extra, then they're always good for a shoulder protector.
No, definitely. And last but not least, when we come to fitting, we're going to quickly touch on air vests or air jackets. And I know that you as Beta are working on a standard, aren't you, for air jackets? Because it's something that we've sort of seen creeping in, I'd say, over the years, but more recently particularly, I've noticed a lot more people in air jackets.
Yeah, absolutely. They come and they go. They were really big, gosh, about 12 years ago in the eventing, when a brand came in and really gave them a big push, and then they sort of settled down again, and now they're coming back again. And just like hats and body protectors, there is a degree of fitting. It's maybe not as much as crucial because it's a garment that you wear over other things, but it is still important to make certain that they do fit, that they're not too tight. Because that can impact then their ability to go off. You've also, it may sound really basic, but it has to be the outermost garment. We have seen cases where people have put a body protector over an air vest. It was not a happy result. So, but they do have to fit. They do have to not get in the way. So there is a degree of fitting. What's different about an air vest as well to the hat and the body protector is pretty much once you get them up and running and they're fitted and you're wearing them, you sort of pretty much can take them for granted. As long as you're wearing them, they're okay. With an air jacket, there is also that added element, not just of fit, but of maintenance.
Which I think people forget, don't they? Because we're not used to it. If we've been used to hats and body protectors, you buy them, they need to replace if they get damaged, or every few years. But that's not the same with air vests.
No, because they actually have they're mechanical, they have moving parts. So you have to ensure that those moving parts will work, whether that be, you have a lanyard that attaches to the saddle, and there's the air canister. And the air canister has a trigger, which when you depart from the saddle and the lanyard is tensed, then that will trigger the pin to go into the air canister that will then fill the air vest. So there's lots of things moving there, and they are susceptible to wear and tear. That's why it's really, really crucial that you do follow the manufacturer's guidelines and get them serviced regularly. And I know we've been working with some of the air vest manufacturer members, and they've told stories of, somebody's had it stored in the barn and they've then hauled it out after 2 years and it's gone off and it hasn't inflated because they've had rats in the barn.
Oh, God.
Or it's been left somewhere wet and the pin trigger mechanism has got rusty. So it's that sort of thing, and just making certain that even their guidance is every time you use it, you need to give it a quick check that the canister's inserted right, the lanyard's attached correctly. So you do have to make a bit more effort with an air vest to make certain that it is going to work when you need it to.
No, absolutely. Is there anything else, Claire, you'd like to add about fitting or differences in safety kit that people can kind of take on and absorb when they're making their choices?
I think one of the big things is the terminology, and we always now talk about body protectors, and that is because they cover the body, front, back, sides. Just be aware, people, if you're buying back protectors, which are coming into the market, it does what it says on the tin. They will offer protection to your back only. And so that, I suppose that's just the key thing to remember, is that there is a difference now between a back and a body protector, and you have to remember that when you're buying your safety equipment.
That's a really good point. I'm sure a lady I used to work for when I worked with horses, she always used to refer to her body protector as her back protector. She was very old school. Like she rode around badminton when she was much younger, and I'm pretty sure she didn't have any safety equipment on because that was the time. She's quite elderly, but she always used to refer to it as her back protector. But they're very different.
But that's because they started as back protectors. The very first ones, we've got a museum of safety kit, and I've got some very old body protectors that were only back protectors. So when they started up by the jockeys, they were literally a piece of foam that you shoved down the back of your jods or your breeches.
Wow. Just to
and
protect the spine.
just to protect the spine. But actually, we now know that most of the really severe spinal injuries happen because of torsion down the spinal column. And really, a body protector or a back protector, as was, will protect the bony bits of the spine, but won't necessarily stop the torsion that does the real spinal injuries that happen. And so that's why they started as body protectors, as back protectors. But then when we came along, they turned into body protectors. But that back, I've got a friend who always refers to them as back protectors. And I just, body protector. Even more important now, because there are now back protectors out there. And also you do need to realise that the back protectors are not to the same standard as the body protectors.
So that means, particularly because eventing, there are standards for body protectors, aren't there, when you go cross country?
Yeah.
A back protector would not be the standard to go cross country. That has to be a body protector.
No, but as I say, the back protectors are made typically now to the motorcycle standard. So that's next on our list of standards. We've just started writing a back protector standard for foam and air. And that is that most of the garments out there that are made to the back, to the motorcycles, have a lower level of protection than the foam used in body protectors.
That makes perfect sense. I mean, you've got loads of information online about this on the BETA website, but also your retailers who are BETA members who have done their BETA courses, and you are, as BETA, are also available, aren't you? If people have got any queries or questions, or they're really struggling.
Oh yeah, and I get them. We get a lot of queries from mums or into our inbox saying, "Oh, I've got this," or "I've bought." And I had one. I've been doing some of the pony days with Pony Magazine.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's brilliant because there are lots of kids who've started riding over the last couple of years, and their parents quite often aren't horsey, so they don't understand all this. So, so we went along, and a lady came along with their body protector they'd bought, and it was to a level 2 standard. So I could say, "No, I'm really sorry, it's just not right." But yeah, we've got loads of resources on the BETA website. If you there's a couple of posters, so you can download them, or if you mail us, we'll send you a copy that can go up in tack rooms. And there's loads of information and downloadable leaflets that will give you any information. And there's also a really handy member directory tab where if you put your postcode in and then you tick, there's little tick boxes, you can tick rider hat fitting or body protector fitting, put your full postcode in, and it will tell you which companies near you will offer that service.
And just remind us of your website address.
It's beta-uk.org.
Amazing. Thank you very, very much for joining us today, Claire. That's been really, really interesting and really useful too.
Thank you very much, Ria. Really appreciate the chance to get the message out.